Welcome back. I thought I'd do an episode on some stats here. I think everybody has more fun looking at the stats this late in the year once you get the bigger sample sizes. So we're getting to the nitty gritty of the season now that we're entering September with this next sim. So what you can see here is a pretty tight playoff race in the NL. You have Atlanta pretty clear ahead of everybody, and then everybody else from 73 in the wild card to 65 wins. And then you have Pittsburgh 62, Houston 64, and San Francisco at 60, all still alive and well there with a shot within 5 games. So it's a pretty good race right now. Sorry, 67 is actually the last playoff seed right now. So 65 would be in the wild card hunt too. So Philly's two back of that wild card, with Chicago dropping 5 in a row has really made that a lot closer again. So same thing as I said before, but then also Philly in that race too is still alive. So it's going to be tough. But you do have those 60-win teams are actually 7 games back, but that's still pretty reasonable with the season left if they get hot. So we'll see what happens there. And then in the AL, we have Minnesota is taking up that last spot at 68 wins right now, and Colorado's right on their butts at 66, and Atlanta at 63 is still alive. Kansas City's actually hanging in there. So Toronto's dropped a couple in a row in Washington, so that's not looking good for their chances now that they're about 8 back, but they're definitely still doable. It's the same thing as I just said with San Francisco at 60 wins there. You can still have you just take a ridiculous September there to turn it around, but it's definitely possible. So that will be interesting to see. We'll jump into the stats here. This is why I wanted to do this episode. I love talking about stats. I made a park factor this morning, just showing the park factors for all the stadiums and how it affects it. So if you're curious, you can take a peek at that. I posted in the general chat for the league too. Just interesting. You can see that Colorado there is almost 8% up offensively in cores. You can see all that information in game. I just thought it'd be better. It's better in a graph form where you can see like the rankings in the game. Is kind of hard to compare stuff. So it's just when it's beside each other like this, it's a little bit easier and you can see who ranks where. And then these things on the far right are actually the doubles and home runs are current season stats, and I compare them. So they're alphabetical order here. So Arizona matches up with this one here. So you can see that like Milwaukee is first place in the league in doubles, 126%. The league average, which is 205 in doubles, and the league average in home run right now is 139. About 80% through the season, so you can see which teams rank highly. I just thought Philly was funny. Philly's first place in home runs, 185% of the league average of home runs, 258, over 100 home runs above the league average by quite a margin there. And then they're 31st of 32 teams in doubles with only 162. So you just see some funny stats like that kind of stand out. But more so, I want to jump into the overall stats. So if you look over here, we'll start with the offensive stats are in blue, the defensive stats are in this orange color there, and then the defensive stuff's on the far right. So you can see here that the league leader in doubles is Milwaukee at 259. League average is 205. Last place teams have about 157, so you get a whole 102 more doubles so far out of Milwaukee and you of New York, just seeing how much that contact and gap power plays up with those really good lineups. That's a lot of extra production there. Home runs, the real significant one. You can see here I pinned the league teams and win percentage to the left here. So if you look at the top 14 home run hitting teams in baseball this year, only 2 of them have a losing record. Nashville, New York, which are pretty home run heavy lineups with kind of weak defenses, so it makes sense. But everyone else in the green there, so you can see that correlates really nicely. The walk rate is Philly and Milwaukee tied at about 10 there. Milwaukee at 10.1, and then 9, and then everybody else is in that really tight window between 8.9 and like 7.2, and then you get some of the teams at the bottom here, the bottom 5, a little bit more of a drop off there. Strikeout rate is interesting. You have the heavy power hitting Philly with a lot of avoid Ks that are low with high power. So a 29% team strikeout rate from Philly, which is pretty insane when you think about the total strikeouts of 4,800 batters faced so far this season from their pitchers. So their offense would be around in the 4,000 mark there, and 30% of them are striking out. So over 1,200 strikeouts, somewhere like that. I don't actually have the total number listed here. The on-base percentage here is league average is at 30.7%. So you can see which teams there are well above that average. Philly at 33%, Colorado at 32%, Boston there, and then the league low is about 28%. Quite a bit of teams there below 300 there, about 8 teams there, 7. So you get the runs created. The best offenses in the league, just over 5 runs created per game. And the lowest in the league are in the mid threes there. So again, real big difference between first and last. The skip a couple of these. The league average BAPIP 287 right now, pretty low. Not insane, but I think the average is close to 3 in real life, 0.30, 30%. So um, just a tad below average. Really good pitching in this league. The league average for positional player WAR is 16, batter WAR. A couple of these teams here, like Milwaukee's 4 clear of Atlanta almost. That's pretty amazing offense there they have. And then the fun one is stolen bases. Detroit leading the way with an 86% stolen base success. San Francisco second, Dodgers third. Total stolen bases, the average is 65, and St. Louis is 120, almost double that. They are, 24 above second place in Washington there, and then me in Baltimore. So you see that St. Louis really with the help of Capelli there, stealing a ton of bases. And then the defensive stats are pretty fun. I like that stuff. So the batters faced, pretty huge difference between first and last there. You have almost 500, or you do have over 500 more batters faced between Detroit and Boston, ranking first and 32nd there in the league. So you can see how much more the relievers have to get used. I actually had a flaw before. I thought RA was runs against, but it's actually relief appearances. So I added in both. So you can see that the teams, this is really fascinating to me. The average team has deployed 344 relievers this season. And some of these teams are at 428, 425. There's actually some teams at the bottom that really use their starting pitchers heavily. 274, 282 relief pitchers have come into the game there. So that's almost, what is that, 40, 56, 70 below the league average. So they just really have some starting pitchers going really deep into those games. So it's different strategies. Some teams, I think, probably really get affected on this individual one here based on the stopper role and the long relievers and emergency starters. Those are reliever tags that make the guys go like 2-3 innings all the time, where some teams might just tag everybody as a middle reliever, setup, or closer, which are generally mostly 1 inning guys. So if depending on how you set up your bullpen, it can make a huge difference on the length of the terms of guys coming into the game. If you just set up a bunch of middle relievers that pitch the 4th, 5th, 6th innings, and then you set up like 2 stoppers that are set to 7 innings plus, and they'll just kind of use whichever one is more rested. They'll constantly be going like 8 and 9, the 8th and 9th inning on 7th, 8th and 9th, or 7th and 8th. And you could set a closer separate. A bunch of teams will actually do, I've seen 3 stoppers. They'll set 3 guys all to 7th inning plus. So then one guy will just do 7, 8, 9, or one guy. And so you can really get a lot of guys doing multi-innings doing that and use a lot less relievers. So there's different strategies, and depending on how much talent you have, I guess it works differently for everybody. So it's really cool to see that difference there, which is, to me, is pretty fascinating. The runs against, you have Cleveland with the best run prevention in baseball, 380 runs allowed, compared to the league average of 505. So they're 125 less runs allowed than the league average. Just fantastic defense, fantastic pitching, really good combination there. Atlanta, Boston, not far behind at all. And then you get the really good top 3 there. Cleveland's just in a league of their own, and then you get 2 teams around 400 here. And then you get a lot of teams from about 430 to 512 here, I'd say, or 504. So you get a big chunk of 14 teams there. Kind of in the middle of the pack there. And then the league worst defenses, 600 and 600 plus runs there. Detroit struggling there with pitching and defense, a little bit of a rebuilding here. Next up, we have home runs allowed. This correlates to the home run percentage. I just did the home run percentage is just, the math is just the total home runs, or the AQ. So total home runs divided by the batter's face. So you get about 2.9% league average in home run rate. So the best home run prevention teams, Atlanta, Minnesota, Cleveland, 2.3, 2.4%. As you can see over the course of a season, between the difference between like 2.3 and a league average like 2.9 is about 30 home runs so far. Probably be about 35 by the end of the season there. We're about 80% of the way through. So really good movement on those pitchers, really good pitching staffs, not pitching tired too often, just real fresh guys, run prevention teams. The best teams in baseball are only walking opposing hitters about 6.6, 6.8% of the time, with the high control pitchers there. The worst in the league are around 9, 10%. So you get only about 3 walks out of 100 batters difference between the best and the worst teams in baseball. So not as crazy as you would think. The strikeout percentages are interesting. if you look at the K percentage for the top leading teams here, you get some heavy, big stuff relievers and some starting pitchers with 60, 70 stuff there. Some big, big rotations there for all three of those teams. The Dodgers, Montreal, and Atlanta all have some real nice starting pitchers because they're doing the bulk of the innings. So those obviously those high stuff relievers really help, but it's really those teams at the top there you can tell are the ones. Same with Cincinnati. Almost all five of these teams have like all definitely the top four have like all starting pitchers. They have like 3 or 4 guys with 60 stuff, and really makes a difference over the course of a season for sure. And then zone range here, some of the best defenses. You get Boston with the highest zone range. They have an 80 range shortstop and a high range second baseman there. He's injured right now, but really good defensive teams. You get some teams in the bottom here. Again, a few teams really struggling there, minus 20 and worse, or some of those rebuilding teams or reloading teams. And then the best catchers at throwing out base runners this year, we had 40% for the Yankees, 36 for Colorado. And then on to the overall team defensive stats last. So we saw the total team zone range, but that's just one part of defense, zone range. That doesn't account for errors and turn double plays and some of those stats and pass balls. So what you have here is I actually have 2 ratings. I do the average that doesn't include double plays and pass balls because those aren't, I don't have those set to percentages. So those teams that face 500 less batters, you'd have to fix the math there to make it per batters faced and stuff like that. So it was a little tricky. So just to make it more realistic, I did the average between the routine, likely, even, unlikely, and remote rankings, 1 to 32. And then I added the errors in there. So you can see that when I average everything out, Boston comes out to the best defense in baseball. Boston is first in routine, so they have a lot of fantastic slick glove guys, don't make many mistakes. 6th in likely, 12th in even, 4th unlikely, 7th in remote. So really a lot of green here in these icons across the board, and the errors, they've let up 49, which the league average is 55, so still pretty good in absolutely everything. Preciado obviously leading the way there. Pretty much sent every single season the team Preciado's been on has pretty much been first in this. Milwaukee led the league every year. They had Preciado, and then he leaves and they drop to 12th. And then Boston jumps to number 1. They're always kind of in the top 3 or 4. So obviously that dude is just a generational Hall of Fame type player. Really sets the tone defensively. You got Minnesota there with an 80 range shortstop, really high range second baseman, really rangy center field, good defense all over the park. Just a really, really solid overall defense. Also they're 8th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, and everything. They're just a little bit lower in the remote and the errors, which causes Boston to be ahead of them. And then you have New York, Cincinnati, Seattle all rounding out the top 5 defenses in the league. And then you can see here just kind of like some of the highs and lows there. If you want to take a peek, you can always pause the screen. But that's it for this episode. I guess I'll just show one last quick thing, is that some of the league leaders defensively. We just talked about that. Preciado, Drew Jones, absolutely amazing defender, plus 16 with 4 outfield assists. Just incredible defender every single season. Robert Puason there is actually 3rd place in the league in total zone range. Just been a monster this year defensively. An 80 rated shortstop. Only has 9 errors, turned 65 double plays. Just incredible player there. On pace for almost 3 WAR with a 63 WRC plus. Pacheco is just a monster offensively this year and almost as good defensively. Hasn't really dropped off at all. One of the best seasons of all time. Really close to that 10 WAR pace, which is really rare. Wenzel Perez has actually been injured for a few weeks. He was right up there in the top 10 defensively also. Luke Leto has been pretty much as good as Preciado, just hasn't played as much. 250 plate appearances, and he also he has 0 errors and 11.8 zone range. So if he had that full 400, 420 plate appearances, like Pacheco has 521 plate appearances, but if he played the same amount of games, he'd probably be right up there too. But big if, and he hasn't, but that's why he's down there. But still probably on that same tier as Preciado, just a little more injured, unfortunately. Emmanuel Rodriguez also, so you get Atlanta having the shortstop and center fielder, both big time money free agents this offseason and producing huge for them. Both guys just incredible defenders, which why they're paired with their offense and pitching, why they're first place by a mile right now. And then you get Josh Richardson's always up here at the top. Really cool to see this guy, Alta Morano, 80 arms, 70 range, up there in the top 10, top 12 defensively overall. Morente is really good. So you get Franco there as a third baseman, your first third baseman on the list. Pete Halpin there, center fielder. So you had Drew Jones and then Emmanuel Rodriguez and Pete Halpin. Right now, the rangiest center fielders defensively. So anyways, that'll be it. I just kind of want to peek over some of the top performing defenders there statistically. So I'll keep this episode at that. Cheers, guys.